Dừng lại. Bác sĩ ơi, ca phẫu thuật này không thể tiếp tục được.
Sao anh vào được vậy?
Ca phẫu thuật này không thể tiến hành được bác sĩ. Tôi xin bác sĩ dừng lại.
Anh bảo này biết bao ảnh hưởng đến ca phẫu thuật của chúng tôi không?
Tôi xin bác sĩ đấy, ca phẫu thuật này không thể phẫu thuật được.
Tại sao chúng tôi không thể phẫu thuật?
Bác sĩ, tôi đã tìm được người thay thế anh ấy rồi. Bác sĩ làm ơn hãy dừng cuộc phẫu thuật này lại.
Ý của anh là bây giờ
The village stirred to life under the tender glow of dawn, the sky painted in delicate shades of pink and orange as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees. At Tieu Nu's modest home, nestled on the edge of a quiet lane, the morning air was crisp with the scent of dew and the faint clucking of chickens scratching in the dirt yard. Tieu Nu sat on a weathered wooden bench just outside her door, her hands trembling as she attempted to tie her son Dewey's shoes. Her vision, clouded by a progressive condition that had worsened over months, turned even this simple act into a Herculean task. Each day the world around her slipped further into a haze of shadows, the faces of her loved ones blurring into indistinct shapes. Beside her, Truong, a kind-hearted man who had become her steadfast support through these trying times, knelt down to assist Dewey with his preparations for school. "Let's put on your shoes, Dewey, nice ones for your mom," Truong said warmly, his voice a steady comfort amidst the morning bustle. Dewey, a 6-year-old with bright, curious eyes that sparkled with innocence, giggled as he slipped on his sneakers. "Mom's still in the bathroom, Uncle Truong. She'll love me when she's done," he chirped, his cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the heavy burden Tieu Nu carried in her heart. Tieu Nu emerged from the bathroom, her face pale and her movements slow, but her smile was tender as she reached out to touch Dewey's cheek, relying on her sense of touch more than her failing sight. "I'm here, my sweet boy. Be good at school, okay?" she said, her voice soft but strained with the effort of hiding her pain. Truong, already gathering Dewey's school bag, a small blue backpack adorned with cartoon characters, nodded reassuringly. "I've got everything ready for him, Tieu Nu. Let's get him to school." Dewey wrapped his small arms around his mother's waist, hugging her tightly as though he could sense her struggle. "Bye, Mom. I'll be good," he promised, waving enthusiastically as Truong led him out the door. "Take care, both of you," Tieu Nu called after them, her voice a mix of gratitude and quiet worry. She sank back onto the bench, the ache in her eyes a constant, throbbing reminder of her fading sight. "My eyes hurt so much," she whispered to herself, her fingers brushing the spot where Dewey had hugged her, the warmth of his embrace lingering like a lifeline. In the yard, the chickens clucked softly, their mundane sounds grounding her in the moment as she waited for Truong to return, her mind swirling with a mix of hope and fear for the day ahead. At the village school, a quaint building surrounded by a small playground, children darted through the gates, their laughter filling the air like a melody. The schoolyard buzzed with the energy of the morning, children chasing each other, teachers calling out instructions, and the occasional clang of a bell signaling the start of the day. Truong handed Dewey over to his teacher, a kind woman with a gentle smile, ensuring the boy was settled before hurrying back to Tieu Nu. As he walked back through the village, the sun climbed higher, casting dappled shadows on the dirt path. His heart pounded with a sense of purpose. Today was the day he would donate his cornea to restore Tieu Nu's sight, a selfless act born from years of unwavering devotion. He had seen her struggle, watched her world darken, and vowed to be the light that brought her back. When he returned, Tieu Nu was waiting, her hands nervously clutching a small bag of essentials, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and a small photo of Dewey to keep her spirits high. "The hospital called," Truong said, his voice steady but urgent. "They can do the surgery today. Let's go." Tieu Nu's breath hitched. a wave of hope and fear crashing over her. Really, Truong? I'll be able to see again? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Yes, Tieu Nu. I've been by your side through all these dark days. I'll be there when your eyes light up again. I promise. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a mid-sized facility on the outskirts of the city, the morning buzzed with activity. Nurses in crisp white uniforms moved briskly through the corridors, their steps purposeful as they carried out their duties, checking charts, delivering trays of medical supplies, and exchanging quick updates with colleagues. In a small office cluttered with files and medical journals, Dr. Han, a seasoned ophthalmologist with a calm demeanor and a reputation for precision, reviewed a stack of paperwork when a nurse approached. Doctor, someone's here to register for a cornea donation, the nurse announced, gesturing to a young woman standing nervously at the door, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Dr. Han looked up, her expression professional yet warm. Hello. You're registering for a cornea donation? The woman nodded, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. Yes, for my relative Nguyen Vanen, born in 1963. He's in critical condition and wishes to donate his corneas, so he can see the world forever through someone else. Dr. Hana's eyes softened with understanding, her years of experience having taught her the profound impact of such acts of generosity. That's a noble wish. Does the family have any requests for compensation? The woman shook her head firmly. No, doctor. We want this to be a charitable act. No fees, just the hope that his eyes will live on. Dr. Han nodded approvingly, a flicker of admiration in her gaze. That's wonderful. Let's prepare a consent form for you to sign. The paperwork was completed swiftly, the woman's signature sealing the selfless act with a quiet solemnity. How soon can we proceed? She asked, her tone urgent, her eyes betraying the strain of her relative's condition. Dr. Han glanced at her schedule, her mind already calculating the logistics. Given his condition, we should act today. Once a patient passes, the corneas can't be used. Please arrange with your family. We'll expedite the process as best we can. The woman nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes as she clasped her hands together. Thank you, doctor. I'll inform my family now. As she left, Dr. Han picked up the phone, her thoughts racing with the possibilities this donation opened up. This could help someone else, she mused, dialing a colleague she had worked with for years. Hello, Shun. You asked me to find a cornea donor for your relative. We just had someone register today. I can schedule the surgery for this afternoon if you bring them in. Sun's voice crackled through the line, filled with relief and gratitude. That's amazing, Han. I'll arrange it right away. Thank you. Dr. Han hung up, a rare smile crossing her face as she leaned back in her chair. 2 donors in just a few days, she thought aloud, her voice tinged with wonder. It's been years since we've had such generosity. It's a good day for miracles. Back at Tieu Nu's home, the morning sun now filtered through the leaves of a nearby mango tree, casting golden patches on the ground. Truong helped her gather a few more essentials, a soft scarf to keep her warm, a small bottle of water, and the photo of Due, which she clutched tightly as if it were a talisman. The car's almost here, he said, checking his phone for the driver's update. Tieu Nu nodded, her hands trembling as she packed, her fingers brushing over the photo of her son. Truong, after the surgery, I want the first person I see to be you. Is that okay? She asked, her voice soft but filled with meaning, her clouded eyes searching for his face despite their impairment. Truong's heart swelled with emotion, his throat tightening at the weight of her words. Of course, Tieu Nu. "I'll be right there," he promised, his voice thick with feeling, his hand squeezing hers gently to convey the depth of his commitment. The car arrived moments later, a modest sedan that honked softly to announce its presence. Truong guided her carefully down the uneven steps of her porch, her arm looped through his as they moved together. "Step carefully," he murmured, his tone protective as they headed to the hospital, the weight of the day pressing down on them both, a mix of anticipation and uncertainty swirling in the air. The hospital corridors buzzed with controlled urgency as the afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long golden shadows on the tiled floors. The faint hum of air conditioning mingled with the soft murmur of voices, nurses giving instructions, doctors consulting in hushed tones, and the occasional clatter of a medical tray being moved. In the operating theater, the air was thick with tension, the sterile scent of antiseptic sharp in the nostrils of the surgical team. The room was a symphony of precision, with monitors beeping rhythmically and the faint glow of overhead lights illuminating the space. Truong lay on one table, his face calm but resolute, his hands resting at his sides as the anesthesiologist prepared him for surgery. On the adjacent table, Tieu Nu was already under sedation, her breathing steady and her face peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil she had endured in her waking hours. Dr. Han, her hands steady and her focus razor-sharp, oversaw the preparations, her years of experience guiding her every move. "We've successfully induced anesthesia for both patients," a nurse reported, adjusting the monitors with a practiced hand, her eyes flicking between the screens and the patients. "Good. Let's begin," Dr. Han replied, her voice calm but commanding, her gloved hands poised to start the procedure. The team moved with precision, each member knowing their role, the gravity of the surgery hanging heavy in the room. Outside, Kien, a close friend of Truong's who had known him since their school days, raced through the hospital entrance, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. He'd left his phone at home earlier that morning while overseeing a construction project, missing a flurry of calls from the hospital that could have alerted him sooner. "Why didn't I check sooner?" he muttered, his breath ragged as he sprinted toward the surgical ward, dodging a nurse pushing a cart and nearly colliding with a visitor in his haste. He'd been at the construction site, a sprawling project on the edge of town, when he finally saw the missed calls, his blood running cold at the thought of what might be happening. "Truong can't go through with this, not if there's another way," he thought, his mind racing as he recalled a promise he'd made days earlier. Kien had vowed to find another donor for Tieu Nu, hoping to spare Truong the immense sacrifice of losing his own sight. A recent call from a colleague had confirmed a new donor, a stroke of luck that had come just in time, but every second now felt like an eternity as he raced to stop the surgery. Kien burst into the corridor outside the operating theater, his chest heaving as he flagged down a nurse who was hurrying by with a tray of instruments. "Doctor, the cornea transplant surgery this morning, has it started?" he asked, his voice urgent, his eyes wide with desperation. The nurse, a young woman with a calm demeanor, nodded, her expression curious but composed. "Yes, it's underway." "Why? Is there a problem?" Kien's heart sank, a wave of dread washing over him, but he pressed on, his resolve unshaken. "I need to speak to the surgeon now." Inside the theater, the team was moments away from beginning the extraction of Truong's cornea, a procedure that would leave him permanently blind in one eye. "Doctor, we're ready to proceed," a nurse announced, holding a surgical tool at the ready, her eyes focused on Dr. Han for the signal to begin. But before Dr. Han could respond, the door flew open with a loud bang and Kien stormed in, his presence a jarring interruption in the sterile environment, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor. "Stop!" "Doctor, you can't continue this surgery," Kien shouted, his voice echoing in the room, cutting through the quiet hum of the equipment. Dr. Han turned sharply, her eyes narrowing behind her surgical mask, her hands pausing mid-motion. "Who are you? How did you get in here? This is a sterile environment, you're risking the entire procedure," she snapped, her tone sharp with irritation, though her professionalism held firm. Kien, his face flushed with desperation and sweat beading on his forehead, held up his hands in a gesture of apology. "I'm sorry, doctor, but this surgery cannot go ahead. I found another donor to replace Truong. Please stop the procedure." Dr. Hana's expression shifted from irritation to cautious curiosity, her mind quickly processing the implications of his words. "You found a replacement donor? Are you certain?" she asked, her voice steady but probing, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. Kien nodded vigorously, his breath still coming in short gasps. "Yes, I just got confirmation. Another cornea is available. Truong doesn't need to do this. Please, I'm begging you to stop." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in, the only sound the steady beeping of the monitors tracking the patient's vitals. Dr. Han glanced at the monitors, then at her team, her mind racing as she weighed the decision. "We're lucky you arrived when you did. A few more minutes and we'd have started the extraction. Stop the procedure for Mr. Truong immediately," she ordered, her voice firm but tinged with relief. The team sprang into action, halting the surgery with practiced efficiency as Kien breathed a sigh of relief, his shoulders sagging as the tension drained from his body. "Thank you, doctor," he said, his voice trembling with gratitude, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Dr. Hana's tone softened but remained firm, her professionalism unwavering. "Since we're stopping this, you'll need to sign a liability waiver. If anything goes wrong, the hospital isn't responsible." Kien nodded, already pulling out a pen from his pocket, his hands steadier now. "I'll sign it right now." As the nurses prepared to move Truong to the recovery room, Dr. Han turned her attention to Tieu Nu, who remained under anesthesia, her face serene despite the chaos that had just unfolded. "Let's proceed with her surgery using the new donor cornea," Dr. Han instructed, her focus snapping back to the task at hand. The team adjusted quickly, the rhythm of the operating theater resuming as they began the transplant to restore Tieu Nu's sight, their movements a seamless dance of precision and care. In the recovery room, a quiet space with soft lighting and the faint hum of a fan, Truong slowly regained consciousness, his vision intact but his mind groggy from the anesthesia. Kien sat beside him, a relieved smile on his face as he watched his friend stir. "You're okay, Truong," he said softly, his voice gentle as he leaned closer. "I found another donor. Tieu Nu's surgery is happening now with the new cornea. You don't have to give up your sight." Truong blinked slowly, his voice weak but filled with gratitude as the fog of anesthesia began to lift. "Really? You did that for us? Thank you, Kien," he murmured, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Kien nodded, his expression warm but humble, his hand resting lightly on Truong's arm. "Tieu Nu's in surgery now. Everything's taken care of. Just rest, you've been through enough." Truong managed a faint smile, his relief palpable, his chest rising and falling with a deep, shuddering breath. "I thought I'd wake up unable to see. I can't believe you made it in time," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Outside, in the hospital courtyard, Kien and Truong sat on a wooden bench beneath a sprawling banyan tree, the afternoon breeze a welcome relief after the intensity of the day. The courtyard was a quiet oasis amidst the hospital's bustle, with patients and families walking slowly along the paths, some lost in thought, others sharing quiet conversations. I almost didn't make it, Kien admitted, his voice low as he stared at the ground, his hands clasped tightly together. I left my phone at home, missed all the calls from the hospital. I only saw them after I got back from the construction site. I thought I was too late. Truong shook his head, his gratitude deepening as he turned to look at his friend. You saved me, Kien. And Tieu Nu? I hope her surgery goes well, he said, his voice steady but filled with hope. Kien clapped a hand on his shoulder, a reassuring gesture that spoke of their long friendship. It will. The doctors are good, she's in safe hands. And I'll stay here to look after her while you recover. You've done so much for her already, he said, his tone earnest. Truong nodded, his eyes glistening with emotion as he looked out at the horizon, the sun now a warm orange glow. After this, I'll bring Tieu Nu to thank you properly. We owe you everything.
And I told the story of my own husband's battle with cancer and chronic pain. As unquote, I'm used to asking people what they have learned from their experiences, so it was natural for me to ask her for advice on what happened her deal with the crushing grief. Obviously, she has been doing something right to be so full of vitality and joy after such a short time. She described it, her travels around the world with sparkling eyes and her plans for the next year with a joyful smile. What a contrast to how I was. Phyllis had been so open with me. I felt encouraged her to ask her, did you ever feel like you were just waiting to die?